Hey, everybody. My name is Harold. I'm an alcoholic. It's a privilege to be here. Welcome to those that are online as well. Welcome to those who are new. I have a sobriety date of April 7th, 1987. I come from St. Louis, Missouri, or as we like to call it, Big Mo. And I have a home group. It's called AA on the Rocks. And we meet on Wednesday nights in St. Louis. Like Love and Service, a strong three legacy group right in the heart of the city of St. Louis. So if you ever come to St. Louis on a Wednesday, I hope that you look us up, look me up. We love to host you. And if we get a hold of you quick enough, we will put you to work. We will get some mileage out of your sobriety. I can promise you. We're going to have there's a little party going down in 2030. I don't know if you've heard about that in our state. So if you're coming to that, I just throw it out there now in all seriousness. If your schedule allows, come in the night early. It starts on Thursday night, but if you come in on Wednesday, which is the night of the home group, we'll be collaborating with other groups and people in our area to have a pre-party party on that night. Just food for thought, something to put in your calendar to think about if you come to St. Louis for the big party. I come from a great line of sponsorship, and I've had 4 sponsors in Alcoholics Anonymous, and 3 of those are passed. And my sponsor today is Steve L. from Nashville. But all 4 of my sponsors have made a big difference in my life. They played a season, they played a role in my life to get me to where I'm at. And I say those things about a home group and about sponsorship because those are just critical parts of why I have the life I have today. So if you're here new, and we have some new people, to really come all the way into this thing is not easy. And I get that because I struggle with it. And I'll share that story with you, how I resisted a lot of what goes on here for a long time. And there's probably people just like that sitting here. And if that's you, well, welcome home, because that's most of us, right? Most of us have that going on in our own lives, at some level. But because I know from my own experience, being here for 39 years, that there's 3 types of people that come to AA. There's those who make it happen. There's those who watch it happen. And there's those who don't know what's happening at all, right? And I've been all 3 of those people. And there's all 3 of those people probably here tonight, even online. And I've been all 3, and I'll talk about that tonight. I was introduced to AA in 1979 in the Department of Corrections. And I just was taken from one facility, charged with a new charge, and brought to another new facility in the northern part of Missouri up on the Iowa border. And it was in that space that I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous in a detention center. A couple of 5 members from AA brought AA into that space. I couldn't tell you what I heard with my ears, but I can tell you what I heard with my eyes, because alcoholics, especially, we listen with our eyes and we think with our feelings. It's just how we're wired, and whether we're coming in off the streets or in a confined space or we're in a treatment center. And that's how I listen. I think it's on page 105 of Bill Sees It. There's a little excerpt from one of Bill's writings, and I'm paraphrasing for the sake of time. But it basically says, it's titled Our Chief Responsibility. And it goes on to say, our chief responsibility is to deliver an adequate demonstration of Alcoholics Anonymous to the newcomer. That's our chief responsibility as an individual, as a group, as a district, as an area, as a whole. And I didn't know that when I got here, but I know that today. And I love that, and I respect that as best I can today. So hopefully tonight's an adequate demonstration, especially if you're new, what recovery can look like in your own life, regardless of where you're coming from. But I can tell you that adequate demonstration that was brought into that facility is why I'm sitting here tonight. I didn't want what they had. I never even heard of AA, and I was far from conceding that I was powerless over anything, much less alcohol. But it was still an adequate demonstration. I was given a plea bargain that night, in that time frame, and the plea bargain went like this. I had a prosecutor and I had a parole officer who understood what I was suffering from much greater than I did. And they were very generous, very graceful, very merciful. And they said, look, we're going to offer you an opportunity. Here's what it looks like. We can revoke your parole, send you back where you came from for 2.5 more years minimum, or you can go into this treatment center called the care unit for 30 days. And I thought, well, I quit school when I was 13, wasn't super bright, but I had enough math to know that 30 days was a heck of a lot shorter than 2.5 years. So it was a pretty quick plea bargain. It was pretty fast. And I went to treatment for the first time. And it's, by this time, the calendar rolled around, it's 1980. And I'm in a small rural treatment center in northern Missouri. And I'm by far the youngest cat there. There's nobody even close to my age. So right away, I'm already disqualifying my way out of this thing. But I had to do the time, the 30 days. And back in that frame of time, in my part of the world, there wasn't recovery and treatment program settings wasn't real clinical. It was basically what we're doing tonight. Most of us centered around the big book, the 12 steps. Most of the people that were there were either volunteers or they were just AA members working there. It's something to do. And the bulk of everything was to get you out into the community, to the local AA groups, and get you connected to recovery, and so that's what we did. And I remember going to my first AA meeting on the outside, little town called La Plata, Missouri. They threw us on a bus. It was kind of like one of those Oats vans, for seniors. And I'm back there in the back, my little face planted against the glass. You probably see a little tear coming on my face. Sad that I got to be in this space. This isn't where I belong. There's something wrong with this picture. But we get to the little town of La Plata, and I mean, you can literally blink your eyes and you're through the town. A little bitty, and most of the people that come are farm people with overalls, and they got billfolds and tire gauges and all that stuff. And there was a woman named Millie. Millie was, if there is such a thing as a rock star, she was definitely a make it happen woman in Alcoholics Anonymous at that time in mid-America. And she had white hair. I mean, as white as you could get, big rosy cheeks, beautiful smile. She looked like Mrs. Claus, and she treated you like Mrs. Claus. And I got there, and she was super sweet to me. And I remember like it was yesterday. It was a long time ago. And she bought me an orange crush soda out of the machine and sat me down and said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're with us tonight." But it was a small group. I mean, literally like right here, this is the meeting. So everybody had to talk. Everybody had to talk. So it came my turn. I didn't want to talk, but it came my turn to talk. And I said, and I just made a declaration and went something like this: I'm only here because the DOC said I had to be. And I'm counting days. I only got so many more days, and you will never, ever see me again, because I am not like you people. This is definitely not where I belong. And this beautiful soul turned on me right in the meeting. She grew horns, fangs, and a tail. Smoke shot out of her nose, fire come out, and she lit me up right there. She said, "Just keep drinking, dumb little punk. That's all gonna happen to you." She became my first resentment. But here's the beauty of this thing. In all seriousness, if you stay here, which is hard, it's the hardest thing to do is stay here. But if you stay here, the impossible becomes possible, and 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. And many years later, when she celebrated her 30-year anniversary, she asked me to come from where I was at the time to celebrate and speak at her group. That's how things come full circle. So she was an amazing woman. Her name was Millie Mays. I didn't want to stay sober. Wasn't planning on staying sober. Didn't stay sober. My home plan, being in the country, growing up in the Ozark Mountains, you know where that's at. Some of you say, "I know about Ozark. I've seen that show on Netflix." Yeah, and that's somewhat true, but it's a little bit like that. But we did keg parties, we did hog roast, we did a lot of stuff outdoors. And we rode in the back of pickup trucks. That's one thing we did a lot of. And they didn't have rules where you just had to sit in the cab. You could ride in the back. And my home plan was the Thomas boys and a bunch of boys, road dogs, picked me up from treatment. They just pulled up in a pickup truck. I jumped in the back. They handed me a big plastic jug full of Kool-Aid and Everclear, called it Jungle Juice. "Thank God you're out of that place, man." And they handed me the jug, and off we went to one of the biggest parties I've ever been to in my life. Seriously, it was a great party on the Sheraton River, summertime. Southern rock bands, it was awesome. And the highlight of that night was me taking that coin at some point after it was dark, walking down to the river with my buddies, taking that coin I had for 30 days, skipping it across the river, pounding my chest, making some kind of rebel yell. I got victory over this thing, and victory over the DOC treatment. I've succeeded, like it was a success story, like I graduated Harvard or something. And I don't ever have to do that again. Thank God, I'm free. And that was the last time I thought about not drinking or had anything to do with recovery for a long time. But that was my introduction to it. I started drinking when I was young. I grew up on the streets. I had a single mom who didn't have much. She had 2 alcoholic men in her life. A husband in St. Louis, a daughter, 2 daughters and a son came out of that. Insanity of alcoholism drove her pretty much mad. She left that marriage. She was gone 10 years. Nobody knew if she was dead or alive. And she resurfaced on the western border of Missouri, on the Kansas-Oklahoma border, in a state mental hospital that was there for a long time. And she was a patient there for a long time. But those 10 years of her life, she never spoke about till the day she died. She never told anybody what that was about, where she went, how dark the season it was for her. She just never wanted to talk about it. She never did. She took it to the grave with her. But she met my dad there. And I came out of that marriage, and he was just another version of what she'd always had. And the sanity was going again. The circus was going, and she just ran him off, man. My mom didn't have anybody in her life. Her parents died super young. I never had any grandparents, no aunts, no uncles. My mom was the full package for me. And she just ran them off and turned her real life over to the care of God as she understood God, all by herself, uneducated, divorced twice in the 60s. Tough space to be in. And but she just trusted her faith and started that journey. And she never looked back and went on to become an incredible woman and died in 2015 and was the greatest winner of my life by far. And so I'm grateful for Mama Long. But she wanted me to know about God. She wanted me she made sure she told me she loved me most days as a young boy. So I had everything a kid could want. But what our book describes as the root of our problem, and I think it's always important to know that, especially if you're new, it's just so much more than just our oppression to alcohol, our dependence on alcohol for relief from care, boredom, and worry, as the book would describe. It's so much more than that. We're just driven by this disconnect. And you hear it all the time from this podium. It doesn't matter where you're at. Some version of that, almost every speaker that gets up here describes that space, that disconnect, that separation, if you would, in their life. Starts out, I always felt like I didn't belong. I always felt like a square peg trying to fit in a round hole. I always felt like everybody else had the answers to the quiz but me. I always felt like everybody knew their lines but me. I always felt like I was born on another planet. I always felt like an old country term. I always felt like I was a day late and $1 short. But it was always, they're describing the separation, this disconnect. And I could have never articulated that or even begin to tell you any of that, but I sure experienced it. And it really took off when we moved. My mom said, look, we're going to move to St. Louis. I said, why are we doing that? And she says, well, you got a brother and 2 sisters you don't know about. And it's really where my life, if I go back and inventory my life, this is where I can really see where I started, the wheels started to really come off my chassis. And we moved to St. Louis and my life changed. And I went from a town of just a classroom, less than 100 kids to a school of thousands. And my life just changed. And this 100 forms of fears, this book would describe it, that we're driven by this 100 forms of fear, self-pity, self-delusion. That's what drives us. It's what shapes us. It controls us at a very subconscious level. We don't even know what we're doing or why we do it. And it's driving my life. And it takes off at this point. And when I got to that town, I didn't look like everybody else. And this is the power of that. I mean, seriously, I didn't know that at the time. I couldn't even begin to articulate at the time. It's easy today because I've inventoried it a million times and I've done it with hundreds and hundreds of other men. It's easy today. But this is what it looks like. When I got to that town in St. Louis and now we're in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, I didn't look like everybody else. I looked like a country kid. I didn't look like anybody around me. But I guarantee you within 6 months, I looked like everybody around. And back then everybody had long hair, everybody was wearing denim, earrings, guys starting to wear earrings was a thing where I was at. It's just coming into play. So quickly I grew my hair long. I took the thumbtack out of my Kiss poster, pierced my ear, right? I started wearing big bell-bottom pants. Billy Jack was one of my heroes on TV back in the day. I always wore a blue jean jacket and a black t-shirt. Quickly I had a black t-shirt and a blue jean jacket. I had on brown boots with red shoestrings in them. And I was off. I made a headband out of a piece of belt. I had this long hair. I had freckles. I had pimples. I had really big gap teeth. I looked like a freaked out Howdy Doody. What I looked at. If you're old enough to know who that is, or Alfred E. Newman, just take one of those images and put long hair on it. That's what I looked like. I was a mess. What you thought of me paralyzed me. You absolutely own the title to my soul. My mom drank her whole life. Until the day she died. She had the cheapest beer in her fridge and always had a 5th Old Crow whiskey underneath the sink. She smoked Virginia Slim cigarettes for many years. If you asked me, did I ever drink ultra wine as a young ultra boy when I was in school? Did I ever drink some of my mom's booze or sip her booze or smoke some of her cigarettes? I'd say yes to all those things. I don't call any of that my first drink. For me, when I'm talking my first drink, I'm talking about a drink that changed my life. The day that it changed. And I was a drummer. I was handed a set of drumsticks when I was young and at 5, and I just gifted at it. It took me to a lot of places. And when I got to that place, it took me around because my mom was never home. I didn't have a father in my life. I didn't have any siblings. I just did what I wanted to. I grew up on the streets. And so the drumsticks took me into a lot of spaces I didn't belong. Older teens, people in their 20s, people in their 30s. And I got introduced to the dark side of life really young, before I was a teenager. handed all the stuff. And my buddy, Steve, who was in our band, his parents went to Florida. He was 17 years old. He says, man, I'm having a party. The parents are out of town. You need to come. And I went to their house, his house, and he's behind the bar playing the big shot. And he asked me the all important question, what are you drinking? Nobody ever asked me that in my life. I had no clue how to answer it. I just said, I guess whatever you're drinking is what I'm drinking. And he gave me a big glass of slow gin and Coke. Remember like it was yesterday. And I went over and sat on the couch, and I finally got the courage to take a pull off it. And it tasted like Robitussin or cough syrup. You know, it was not a big deal. I said, this isn't that bad. And I hit it a little more. But it wasn't long that the magic started to happen. The dopamine rush just blasted through my body. The euphoria just rose to an all-time high. You know, and I started to breathe, started to get a smile on my face like I never had before. I hit a little more, the smile grew bigger. Hit a little more, eventually the smile wrapped all around my head, man. And it changed my life. And really from that moment till now, I mean that my life would never be the same from that time. I got as sick as I've ever been off alcohol that night. I swore off alcohol that night. I was so sick. And I said my first plea bargain prayer that night. You all know how that prayer goes. If you're here, you know how that prayer goes. God, if you get me out of this, what? Never. I'll never do it again, right? And if you're really alcoholic, you got to add this to it. And this time, I really mean it, because you burnt that prayer into the ground. You wore that prayer out. I burnt that prayer before I was 13. I wore that prayer out. But I wanted to do that forever. I didn't say it out loud, but pretty much I made a declaration in my subconscious. I'm going to do this. And it's not just the effect for alcohol. It was the behavior. It was the context. It was all of it. I loved it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And I set out to do that. And it did everything but kill me, ultimately. Alcoholism, the journey with it, over that time to go in deep. But it was fun. Then it was fun with problems. Then it was nothing but problems. And those seasons last different periods for different people. People drink a long time and have a lot of fun. It wasn't my story. It was problematic from day one. It was problematic. But we didn't have money. My mom didn't have any money. I didn't have any money. So it led to a life of crime, burglaries, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it took me to a lot of dark places quick before I was even 13. And my life took off. The Department of Corrections took ownership of my life, and it stayed that way well into sobriety. I left home when I was 15 for good. I quit school when I was 13, and I just was out there, put loose and fancy free, doing my deal. It took me to a lot of dark places. When I was 15, I hooked up with a guy named Scotty. Scotty was just a hippie, drifter, gypsy, whatever you want to call him. Big, tall guy, skinny, long hair, way past his belt buckle. Had an old UPS van that he turned into a living quarters, and he was headed back to Austin, Texas. I said, man, I need to go to Texas. I've never even been out of Missouri, but I need to go to Texas. And off I went with a guy. It's hard to even think about that today because I got grandkids and raised 5 kids in recovery. To think about a 15-year-old, any 15-year-olds in my life doing something like that. I couldn't even imagine it. But here I am, I'm gone. And I take off with this guy. And I lived all over the South for a long time, different places. Started in Texas, Tennessee, ultimately landed in Georgia, Acworth, Georgia to be exact, about 20 miles north of Atlanta. And that's where I had my first real bottom with alcohol. It's where I really had, if there was a moment of clarity, if there was a moment where you just hit pause, where you really took the spotlight of truth shine on your life, you had a little bit of ownership, you had a little bit of vision, what you were about, and a little bit of desire, I don't want to live like this no more. And it happened for me when I was 19. And I'm living in Georgia in this beat-up old trailer park called Red Barn Trailer Court. If you remember Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, remember that cartoon? And there was the island of misfit toys. Well, that was Red Barn Trailer Court. All the rejects of the South were in my trailer park. There was nobody from Georgia in my trailer park. I lived next door to 3 guys named Pork Chop, Hollywood, and Screwdriver. So tell you how life's going on. But I was playing music in the bars all the time, loved those spaces, still love those spaces today. I love live music. I love that jazz. I love all that stuff. But at that time, it owned me. I was a blackout drinker from day one. And I woke up on a Saturday morning in Acworth, Georgia, in our trailer. I didn't even make it to my bedroom. I had cowboy boots on, blue jeans, a flannel shirt, a beige vest, big tomato head. That's what we call a hangover in the South. Big tomato head. Woke up with it. No idea what I did the night before. But when I woke up, I realized I had blood all over my hands, dry blood on my jacket, my vest. and I couldn't figure out what happened to me. And I went to the bathroom looking to see if somebody got me at least once before the night was out. I had that gift. I don't know if any of you had that gift when you were out drinking. Did somebody want to do that to you once before the night was out? But I had that gift. It didn't happen all the time, but I was very capable of that gift. But I couldn't find anything wrong with me until I went to the bathroom and got undressed. And I realized somebody sliced me around my side and stabbed me in my rib cage a couple of times. I couldn't tell you what happened that night, but this is what's important, especially if you're new. And I just emphasize this part of my story because it just shows what alcoholism is and why it's so cunning, baffling, and powerful, and why in all reality, most people will never do what we're doing tonight. Most people who suffer from this thing will never have the privilege that we have tonight. They'll never even get here. They'll never be in a treatment center. They'll never walk into an AA meeting. They'll just go to the gates of insanity and death out there. There's millions of people right now chasing the effect produced by alcohol around the world. And some of them, this will be the last time they do it tonight. And why? And it's way past denial. That I will tell you, it's way past denial. Denial is only mentioned twice in the big, once on page 10 and once in the spiritual appendix. The way our book describes this phenomenon, this mental obsession, this physical allergy, and this spiritual malady, is it describes it, not that denial is not a part of it, it's pretty much the human psyche about everything we do. But denial, I know that those banners are there, but I'm not going to look at them. I know they're in the room, but I'm not looking at them. I'm going to forget they're there, pretend they're not there, but I know they're there. The way our book describes alcoholism is way past that. It describes it on the basis of delusion and illusion, meaning I can't see myself for what I really am, and I can't differentiate the true from the false. And it's that dilemma that gets most of us. And this is what it looks like on real life. I came out on that front porch of that trailer, scared, crying, highly emotional, snot coming out of my nose, can't even hardly hold a cigarette. I'm shaking so bad. Mumbling to myself that I got to do something different than I'm doing right now. For the first time, as far as I can remember. I'm 19 years old at this time. But, our book describes alcoholism, personifies alcoholism. It takes an old English character, John Barleycorn, attaches it to alcoholism. I can almost visualize that the personification of King Alcohol sitting right next to me with his arm around me, consoling me, calling the great compromiser. And this is how the conversation goes in my mind, in my dark little predator mind. Man, I got to do something different than what I'm doing. And you're right, kid. You do. And you need to do it quick. But before you do anything drastic, grab your old army jacket and let's walk up here to the Magic Market and get a quart of beer and a pack of smokes. I'm like, man, that sounds like a really great idea. And I didn't even wash the blood off my hands. True. I just got the jacket and I started walking up to the Magic Market. And that sense of ease and comfort was over me before I ever got there. I was feeling better before I got there. I almost skipped to the liquor store. I was so excited. I got the quart of beer and a pack of smokes. I remember like it was yesterday. I walk out, I grab the bottle, I twist it, make that noise we love so much. And the spirit of King Alcohol come out of that bottle. And I took a mighty pull of it like we do that first drink of the day. Make that really bad pucker face that we make. And that was the last time I thought about not drinking for a long time. And that's alcoholism. And I'm forever grateful that I got past that, because most don't. And if you're here tonight and you have a desire not to drink, whether you're a day sober or you're 60 years sober, man, I hope for myself and for you that you hang on to it with everything you got, because if it ever slips through your fingers, friends, you never know if you ever draw a sober breath the rest of your life. It's just the heart-wrenching truth of that. We just buried a guy in my home group. On February 28th, I gave him a six-month coin. Before March 28th, he was dead from acute alcoholism poisoning. That's how fast it goes. And he was loved by everybody. It was absolutely crushing in our home group in Forest Time. Absolutely crushing. I remember getting a text at 2 a.m. I didn't even want to hear it. I heard it ding on my phone. I knew what they were going to tell me. As they found him behind his door, he was still alive, slowly breathing. They got him to the hospital, but ultimately he was pronounced dead from acute alcohol poisoning. That's what I'm talking about. I came back to St. Louis in 85. I continued to drink. My life crashed pretty hard. 1987, in a lot of trouble, felonies, parole violations. I'm on my way back to the penitentiary in a cage one more time. And that's where I finally surrendered to this thing. Didn't know that was it. Wasn't like a lifelong surrender. It was like, God, help me. It was the most honest thing I've ever said in my life. I've heard that prayer a million times from this space. But from that moment to this now, as I sit here today, 39 plus years later, I never found it necessary to drink again. Now, I was one of those guys. I didn't know what was happening. I went all the way back to northern Missouri. Why? Because I listen with my eyes and I think with my feelings. That's where this demonstration recovery was planted for the first time. Lots of recovery in St. Louis, didn't know any of it. I went all the way back to northern Missouri. One, because it was familiar, and two, because I was in a lot of trouble. That was it. That was my motivation for going. I went there, and I wouldn't even call it being 12-step. It was just a guy who had 2.5 months of sobriety. His name was Gary. He was the Ebby in my life. We all have Ebbies here. Whether you know who that is or not, you have that. Call him your angel. Your godsend. I don't care what you want to call him. That person that shows up and makes a big difference in how your life turns out. This was my guy. He was 2.5 months sober. Shows up, and he's not there to be my sponsor. He's not like, hey, dude, let's go through the steps. He just got out of that place, but he was on fire for recovery, on fire. And he's like, come back. He's like, dude, he comes into my room. Never seen this guy in my life. He's got a clipboard in his hand. He's smacking it. He's like, dude. And I go, yeah. He goes, you're up for a meeting tonight. I said, a meeting? Yeah. What kind of meeting? He says, an AA meeting. I said, man, I'm not going to that. He was disappointed. He goes, what? You're not going to go? I said, I'm not doing that. That's not why I came here. That's what I'm thinking. And he politely left, and he came back a second later and he stuck his head in. He goes, well, do me a favor. I go, yeah, what's that? And he goes, why don't you smile real hard and try to get it over with? And he left. And I sit there and thought about what he said. Nobody ever said anything like that. I never even heard that before. What do you mean smile and get it over with? What's there to smile about? But the next thing I know, I'm smiling. He won my confidence. And now I'm getting my stuff together, and I tracked this dude down in the treatment center. I said, hey, finally can't find him. He goes, yeah. I said, you still going to that meeting? He goes, yeah. I said, man, that is awesome. He goes, why is that so awesome? I said, because I want to go with you. And then he lights up like 4th of July. He goes, man, that's amazing. And I said, why is that so amazing? He goes, because I can't get anybody else to go with me. So I knew I swallowed the hook, man. And I was like, bad choice right now. But he took me to the meeting, and we went down to the parking lot. And he had a 1970 pea green Plymouth Duster that we could pass the basket right here with amongst these gentlemen right here and pay for that car. It was just trash car. I mean, there's no exaggeration. There was no exhaust. Mufflers were gone. Rust in the floorboards. Had 4 mats, but no floorboards. Wooden speakers, cheap RCA speakers in the back, hot wired stereo, trash everywhere. And we get in this car, and we're going to drive. We're in rural Missouri. We're driving down to the town square area where all the churches are at, because that's where all the AA's at. And we get in the car and we take off, and it's loud. There's no mufflers. You can imagine, and carbon dioxide just pouring through the floorboards. And you're trying not to die from asphyxiation. And he's got a smile that wraps around his head. Why? Because he's got credibility. He's going to show up. He's got a new guy, points, good thing. Get a good parking spot, maybe an extra cup of coffee. I don't know what you get. But he starts giving me the AA pitch. He starts telling me how great his life is since he quit drinking. And I'm looking at him. He had prison-issued glasses. I'm looking at his car. And I think I invented the word right there, or at least coined the phrase. I'm like, dude, I hate to break it to you. It's exactly what I said to him. But it really looks like your life sucks to me. But alcoholics are quick. I mean, fast. Even at 2.5 months sobriety, he says, well, tell me about your car. Of course, I don't even have a car, right? And a rumor, and of course, he's going to dig me. He's like, and the rumor has it you got a big trial going on. How's that working for you? So he humbled me real fast. We get to the meeting, and he gave me some of the best advice I ever got in my life. He said, man, we're going to go in this meeting, and let's hope they don't call on you. And I said, I'm with you. I hope they don't call on me. He says, if they would call on you, here's what you say. You say, my name is Harold, and I'm an alcoholic. Don't add anything to it. Now, I have no idea what he's talking about. And he goes, when you say alcoholic, it has a broad definition. You can stretch it like an accordion. You probably did some of this and some of that, and some of these, some of those. And you're from this is exactly what he said. And you're from the Ozark Mountains. You probably slept with a few farm animals too. And I started laughing. And he goes, so just be Harold alcoholic. I said, man, I've been Harold alcoholic ever since that day. I've never had to fight, that identification. I went into the meeting and I sat next to a guy that I didn't know, a complete stranger. And if you're new tonight, you might have this very question. This is the question I had for him. How long do we got to come here? And he's like, what? I said, how long do we come here? He goes, what do you mean? How long does the meeting last? No, I mean, how long does this last? AA last? Is it like 6 months? Is it 60 days? How long does it last? And he was perplexed. He says, man, you have to come until you want to. And that was not good news. It wasn't even on the top 500 things of my life to do was to go to AA, especially forever. And I said, I'm thinking, I don't want to be here right now, much less tomorrow night. And I dang sure don't want to be here when I look like you. That's what I'm thinking. And now all these years later, I look like that guy. But I told you, I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what recovery means. Recovery means to be restored to health. I thought I had a drinking problem. I didn't know I was pretty fractured long before I ever drank. I didn't know extreme self-centeredness and separation was the root of my problem. Didn't know that. Just thought I was powerless over alcohol. And if I could just not do that, life would be good. I came back to St. Louis. I didn't go to AA. Thank God for this Evie, this angel, this God sent in my life. Because he kept calling. We didn't have smartphones. He just called me on the landline. Did you go to AA? No. Why? I don't know why, Gary. I don't know why. But he would say, your life depends on it. And I knew that was true. As much as I didn't want that to be true, I knew that was true. I finally got the courage to go to AA. And then I watched it happen for 3 years. I came into this thing and I watched it happen. The hardest thing for me to do is raise my hand and say, I'm Harold, I'm an alcoholic. It felt like a confession. That's what it felt like. I said it. My name's Harold, I'm an alcoholic. Are you happy? Don't ever call me again. Thank you very much. And that was where I was at. I didn't understand recovery and I didn't understand that. And I watched it happen. I got involved in the social piece immediately. I had a sober band, killer sober band called Alliance, played on sober softball teams, went to sober dances, went all kinds of crazy stuff, chased sober girls, and I mean, I'm like crazy. And I met Debbie at this time of my life. She was in St. Louis for a convention. I got a picture of me standing with her in 1988. I got like a Bee Gees outfit on, ready to break the Lord's Prayer and go get it on this place called Spankings. That's where I was at in new sobriety. And that's the way it was for 3 years. I was on step 0. Life was on fire for fellowship, but what was going to really solve my problem, this transformation that needed to happen, I wasn't anywhere close to it. Why? And if you're sitting here, I mean, seriously, it's a great question. Why? Why do I resist this stuff? I hear speaker after speaker, go to meeting after meeting, hear people comment, see the smiles, see their lives, see the storybook lives, see all this stuff. But why do I resist this stuff? And I can just tell you what I've seen, what I've heard, what I experienced. But the reason I think we do it, I know for myself, is I don't believe it'll change my life. Because if I really believed it would change my life, you couldn't keep me from doing it. I would knock you over to do it. But I'm so self-centered, I'm so fractured, I'm so separated. I don't see how it's possible to change my life. I'm so full of our culture of individualism and consumerism and materialism and secularism and going down the road. I'm so shaped by that. My whole life is shaped by that. I don't have anything. I don't have nothing. So therefore I am nothing. And I struggle. So it took me 3 years to finally ask for help, here. Seriously, it took me 3 years to really get serious. And I walked up, I asked the guy I could walk to his house because I didn't have a car. His name was Roy. I went to Roy's house and he was 13 years sober. I was coming up on 3 years of sobriety. And I said, Roy, would you sponsor me? He says, come to my house and sit down. And it was probably it's definitely the turning point in my recovery, this conversation. And what he said that night is as true tonight as I sit here with you tonight, as it was that night. And I went there and he says, you've been around for 3 years, Harold. Tell me about your life. And I said, I'll tell you about my life. Well, I'm 25, I'm going on 26. I don't have an education. I don't have a GED. I got a criminal record. I don't have a license, and I probably never will the rest of my life. I live in a piece of crap house up the road in the basement. I got a piece of crap car held together by bumper stickers that I can't legally drive, but I do anyway. I said, my life sucks, Roy. Take the word sucks, capitalize it, highlight it, italicize it, and make a neon sign out of it. Sucks, sucks, sucks. That's my life. And vomit that all over his table. And he listens very gracefully. He goes, man, Harold, I'll be the first one to admit you've been dealt a pretty tough hand in your life. But I hope you're going to hear what I'm going to tell you. That everything you have in your life right now, right this second, sitting here, you have attracted to yourself by who you become. And the day you can own that truth is the day you're on your way to some real change. But till you can own that truth, take ownership for your life, this vicious little cycle you're on, you're eventually going to drink again because you're not happy about your sobriety. You're not. You're like a candle in the wind. You're eventually, a gust is going to come and you're going to blow out and you're going to drink again. Or you're going to end up like my father. My father was an alcoholic who never got any of this. Never, I don't even know if he ever been to a recovery meeting in his life. But at age 54, he took his life. That's how my dad stopped drinking. So you're going to do one or two things, man. You're either going to grow or you're going to go. And the $1 million question is, what do you want to do? And you would think it would be easy. But finally, I was out of ideas. And that's what I know you have to be here. You have to be out of ideas. And you have to come to the end of yourself. And I finally came to the end of myself. And I said, let's do it. And its taste is so good, I never stopped from that day till now. It didn't happen in one big cataclysmic explosion. I don't want to paint that picture for you. It was a grind, but I stayed committed to it. And just what's promised to you. My sponsor, Tom, was a sponsor of Kent's as well for a long time, had this definition for a miracle. When preparation meets opportunity and God does the introduction, great things can happen in your life. But up to this point, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared for the opportunities. It isn't that the opportunities are there, they just wave at you as they go by. But when you are prepared for them, when you start to heal, and I'm not talking, monetarily or anything, I'm just talking about you start to heal your mind, your soul. The soul I would define as your mind, your will, and your emotions. You start to heal and you start to become prepared for what comes your way. And 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 anymore. And the impossible starts to become possible. And I started that journey. And it led to a storybook life. It led to a life that I wouldn't change for anything. And it was an incredible ride. I got married in Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell in love with a little bald-headed woman with no teeth. It was in the maternity ward. They said, here you go. She belongs to not once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, a boy and 4 girls. Oldest one's 34 today. It's been a beautiful ride. None of these kids had to see me drink ever in my life. They're growing up in a sober life. They're all educated. They're all doing wonderful today. And I'm grateful for that. I was able to go back to school finally. I was 30 plus years. I was double-digit sobriety, over 30 years old when I got a GED finally. Had to go back to school, go to class. I couldn't just pass it because I quit school when I was 13. But I went to school, signed up for community college. I was already pretty successful in business. First day I walked into class, the class thought I was the professor. I said, I'm not the professor, and I had to take the class. And I passed the class, 16 weeks. And I went on to get a bachelor's degree and walked across the stage and got a bachelor's degree and stayed on the dean's list the entire time and was able to send my mom a bumper sticker to say, hey, your kid made the honor roll. It was pretty funny, 30-something years old. But I walked across the stage and got a master's degree in business and wrote a business plan to do some things. And I did those things and started businesses and sold them and did that once, twice, 3 times since I've been here. Walked across the stage, eventually got another master's degree and really seconds and inches from having a doctorate degree. It's just the impossible becomes possible all the time here. And I've had a great run. It's like an S&P 500 fund. If you took it from 1925 to today, it's up. Okay. Is there a few recessions? You bet. We don't have time to get into recessions. Call me and I'll be glad to tell them to you. Just life on life's terms. Typical problems we run into here. Girls, money, power, glory, prestige, all those things. I have my battles with all those things, but I've survived all those things. But in the few minutes I have left, I really want to just share with you what ultimately changed my life. My sponsor said to me, Harold, do you want to have a storybook life? And I thought, what does that even mean? What is that? Who would say no to that? Yes, of course I would love to have it. And he goes, then they're going to do 2 things well. And if you do these 2 things well for the rest of your life, one day at a time, it will materialize for you. And I said, what is those 2 things? He said, you always got to have a new guy you're working with. If you don't have a new person you're on this journey with, I don't care what you're doing, you stop immediately. You go get out the rod, you go get out your bait, and you go fish where there's fish. But you always have a new guy, number 1. Number 2, you got to go somewhere once a week where you don't want to end up. I don't care where it's at, but just go somewhere once a week you don't want to end up. And if you do those 2 things consistently for the rest of your life, you will have a storybook life. And I can tell you with a straight face, I've done that for well over 35 years. And it started in the Skid Row missions in St. Louis. In 1993, guy called and said, hey, man, would you come out to this prison and give an A? Talking, I busted out laughing. I said, dude, do you know who you're talking to? He goes, yeah. I said, man, they're not going to let me come to no prison. Are you out of your mind? He goes, man, you've been off paper. I said, I'm off paper now. He says, I got a lot of pull out here, dude. I'm pretty sure I can get you in here. I said, well, let's just pretend. Let's pretend. I made a pact a long time ago that I ain't never, ever going back to one of those places. And he said, okay, well, run that by your sponsor and call me back. So that journey started for me in 1993. And I got a VIC, Volunteer in Corrections, and I'm in a maximum security prison. I've been doing that for over 35 years, once a week. And then other things that I do. 75% of my AA is behind a confined space, whether it's treatment or it's prison. And that's changed my life. I could literally sit here all day and share with you story after story after story. Some of those stories live here in your state. Some of those stories have been right here at this podium that I've walked those journeys with. It's been an amazing run, but I'll close with this. On page 152, the member asks AA a question. If you're new tonight, you have this question, whether you know it or not. Do you have a sufficient substitute for King alcohol? The only thing that's ever gave me relief, the only thing that's taken away the care, worry in my life, the only thing ever. Do you have a substitute for it? And the book says yes, and it's vastly more than that. It's a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the word fellowship's in the verb form, meaning that you have to participate in your own sobriety. But if you do that, if you really give yourself to that, the most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Couldn't be a truer statement. Your imagination will be fired. You'll make lifelong friends. Evidence right here, right this second. But the most important part is how it ends on page 152 to 153. It says that you're going to have the privilege to walk shoulder to shoulder with other people and help them rediscover life. And if you do that long enough, you're going to finally know what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. You're going to move, another way to say it, probably the best way to say it, is you're going to move from a taker to a giver. In my experience, if that does not happen, you will not stay here. You will get bored and you will get sick, and eventually you'll look for relief and it won't be here. So I invite you to come all the way into this thing and just sit all the way down and stay here, which is the hardest part. But you gave me a 4-point model that I live by today. Live a life of humility. Doesn't mean you don't have goals or ambitions. This means that you have God's ambitions now in your life and you're living for those deeper than you are your own. 2, you live a life of self-sacrifice. 3, you live a life of other-centeredness. And number 4, you learn how to love everybody, even the people you just don't care for. And you gave me that model for living many years ago. And I've been trying my best, fail miserably sometimes, but really try my best to practice that in my life. And it's made a huge difference in how my life turned out. And I can promise you it'll make a huge difference in how your life turns out. So thank you for allowing me to come and hang out with you guys tonight. And thank you mostly for my life, because it's pretty awesome. That's all I got.